This is Spiritual Souls Sliding Sideways, Chapter 16, Success of Gods. Knowing is my power, power is my control, control is my perfection, perfection is my downfall. I wanted it all. I wanted complete power and control over everything. I wanted what would allow me to have the best life ever. I understood how to gain power and control. I knew if I could gain enough power, I could access the God levels. I believed that we could access certain levels of understanding. I could rise to the power level to access it. I felt I could be the master manipulator of reality and gain the power I sought. I wanted to harness the power of existence. I wanted to be a powerhouse that would be a force of unstoppable gain. Each of us is energy, and combined we create more energy. When we combine, we can all create synergy. When we become synergy, we can shine brighter in the darkness. Synergy is tough to achieve. It relies on everyone being completely open. If even one person is not completely open, it can weaken the strength that synergy can provide. I knew getting people to take part in complete openness would be difficult. How much trust would it take to be that open and vulnerable? I knew that getting people to be that open and vulnerable would be a great challenge. I knew getting people to stay open would be like having a can without a can opener. I craved the power that I wanted intentionally. I realized I couldn't easily gain this power from others, so I needed to find a way to tap into the universe myself. How could I tap into the energy that flowed continuously throughout all existence? I needed what I could not gain. I saw what I could not connect to. I knew connecting to the universe could be as simple as being open myself. I knew it could be as complicated as having the right understanding and knowledge. I was willing to do almost anything to gain the power I knew was there. The knowledge I possessed made me feel like I deserved the power. I understood how real possession of that power would be the ultimate goal. I knew how to do things. I knew how to organize everything. I was embracing the structure and order of existence. I need to be in control because I did know how everything should be. I needed the power because I knew how to use it. I was in a godlike state of mind because I knew the thoughts of God. I was a human God because of my understanding. I knew how I could change the world and how it needed to be exactly done. I felt angry and frustrated when others didn't understand or accept my ideas about order. I was a mini-God, and soon I knew I would find my full power. I knew I would find the knowledge to have absolute control over suffering and pain. I was so close to being all-knowing, I could almost embrace it. I needed to figure out how to make my thoughts a reality. The more I tried to gain power and control, the more isolated I felt. I was a god. I could not trust anyone to follow my bidding. I could not turn to anyone to help me carry out my dominating need for control and power. I could not get anyone to commit to what I needed to access the higher levels of God. I learned how to hit many dead ends. I learned how much knowledge I did not have. I was not deterred from my goal. I did not have the understanding and comprehension, but I was going to get what I wanted. I faced one disappointment after another. I was reaching for the fruit of knowledge. I faced ups and downs as I navigated the many waters in the spiritual ocean of knowledge. I was going to find the knowledge to access power. I did not feel I was being selfish because I was going to make the world a better place. Soon I would finally receive the power I was going to gain. I was going to be a God under God, or with God like Jesus. I kept getting back up no matter how many times my search for power and control backfired on me. I was reaching for things I did not understand. I did not know that there was more than power and light needed to access God levels. There was and is one more step to gain control of reality. I also needed to align myself with God. I thought I was aligned with God because of the good I would do. I found out I was only aligned with myself. I was a human, selfish God without power and control. When trying to be a God brought me down too far, too many times, I knew I needed to change something. I needed to stop wanting what God has. I needed to stop wanting power and control. I needed to stop trying to force knowledge into my reality. I was becoming a train wreck, and I could not see it. I possessed the knowledge of how to be God, but I was missing how my effort to be God was ruining my life. I stopped focusing on living. I started to focus on my need to only gain power and control. I could not stop my search for being a god. I was so focused on how to gain power and control, I was neglecting the life I was living. I realized I had God syndrome. I did not know how to get away from wanting to be a god. It did not make sense to not want power and control. I could not rationally surrender my beliefs about what I could achieve. I needed to stop myself from ruining my life. I needed to focus on living and surrendering my journey towards greatness. My journey towards greatness was only hurting everyone around me. I was neglecting the connections I needed to nurture. I was willing to sacrifice everything for power and control. I did sacrifice everything many times. I became so obsessed with being good that it increased my need to have what I needed. I sacrificed everything for the gain of power and control. I knew I needed to sacrifice everything for the humility I did not possess. I needed to try and go from my need to be a god to a need for serving God. When I turned my life around to serve God, I felt there was no way that could go wrong. I started to make the sacrifice to help others and surrender my need to be a god. My sacrifice for others made my need to be a god more enticing. I came to realize that sacrifice for anything was that. It is sacrifice. Sacrifice takes more out of me than what I was gaining. I needed to gain to give. Whether trying to be a god or sacrificing things for the common good, I began to learn that the lessons of sacrificing required more than I could give. I needed to do what I was doing with honesty, not forcing my way through everything. I felt confused from failing to achieve real power and control. The failure I felt and not giving my all became too depressing. We can reach for anything in life, but what will we neglect that is as important? When we are juggling our busy lives, what is our focus? What matters more and what does not matter at all? What do we need to do to manage the vital parts of our lives? What do we need to do to keep our lives heading in a productive direction? God syndrome and selfless sacrifice need the understanding of balanced wisdom. Regardless of what we are trying to achieve, we need to consider why it is important and if it is achievable. We can reach for what we cannot obtain while neglecting what we already have. We need to be capable of being happy to provide honest happiness to others. When we sacrifice without gain, we risk burning out on whatever goal we wish to achieve. We are more guaranteed to fail at something when we starve ourselves of what we need. How good would it be to feed the hungry and not eat as well? What good would it be to starve to death while feeding others? We are a design that can give and give, but we also are like the people we are feeding. The feeder needs feeding. In my journey to godhood, I came to understand my inner thirst for satisfaction, power, and light. I had an empty space inside that was the size of 4 of our suns. My motivation was not to be a god alone. It was for my feeling of completion and satisfaction. I came to find my true need to become a god was because of how empty I felt. I knew that nothing on this planet would provide the satisfaction of feeling alive that I felt I needed. I allowed my own needs to drive me while I disguised them with my secondary need to help others. I did not want to face how much I needed. I did admit to myself how much I needed to meet my and others' needs. I felt a profound need for God. I wanted to access God for my happiness and the happiness of others. My true motivation was to feed myself first. I would share the power and light once I had gotten what I needed. My need was great and my void was empty. My own emptiness caused God syndrome. How could I give up on God syndrome when I was using it for my own needs first? My motivation to help others served the same purpose of selfishness. I needed power and light first to be able to give it. I thought being sacrificial would get me more of what I needed. I would empty myself into others for their happiness. I would stay empty because of their needs, needing to stay satisfied. When you give what you have to another empty person, you should not expect anything back. The empty person has nothing to give in the first place. I needed God in both cases of God syndrome and my effort to be selfless. The power and light are within God's control. I felt frustrated that God was not listening to me. Why did my needs not matter enough to God to preserve me and empower me? Did my life matter to God? Did my spiritual downfall matter to God? Did it matter to God at all that I was wandering in the darkness? I did not have answers to these questions until much later in my life, long after I made many horrible choices. I came to find that my own thought process was out of order. My motivations were sometimes completely selfish. What would have happened if God had blessed me with what I wanted at any given time in my life? How much would my life have changed if I had received anything I had asked for? Did I possess the wisdom and intelligence to not abuse any God-given blessings? I tried to be ready for the positive and negative benefits that would come with God giving me what I wanted. God's love for me would have intoxicated me. I would have felt more special than anyone else. I would have been careless if I had given everything to everyone, no matter the outcome. I may not have the wisdom or knowledge to handle power and light properly. I do not know how I would respond to being complete and happy. I could not be sure. I would not hoard the light and power God would give me. I have become wise enough to realize I may never be wise enough. When we reach for anything in life, we must consider how much we need. We must consider the extent of our emptiness. We must consider the extent of what it would take to make us feel satisfied. We all continue to live and find happiness in one way or another. We try some things or many things to be happy. We put forth a great effort or a little effort to be happy. I still go hungry because I stopped wanting satisfaction. I learned that satisfaction only happens when the flow of what satisfies me never ends. We can only stay satisfied by breathing when we do not have to stop breathing. True satisfaction is when we never have to surrender what is making us happy. True satisfaction comes at the sacrifice of energy from someplace. How would we divide the universe so we could have our own never-ending reception of power and light? How long would we remain satisfied if the flow of power and light stopped? God syndrome is the need for a continuous flow of power and light. Being selfless is the need to share never-ending power and light. We are so limited in what we can do. We are not even close to what is limitless. The more a need motivates us, the more we will discover that only endless bliss can satisfy our needs. I found bliss for a second. I found bliss when I was no longer connected to anything. I had become like a battery that does not give or take power. It is achievable to reach bliss by being self-contained. If we choose to be self-contained, the bliss we have will only be on a self-contained level. Can we obtain bliss by staying connected in a world that is full of give and take? Bliss and synergy depend on the right balance. Each person has their own needs, and what they would be willing to share is the question. For us to maintain true bliss, we would need a continuous, unlimited amount of energy flowing into us and out of us. I have learned to be somewhat content with the energy I have. I still have a need to save others and myself. I realize I am only human, and I can only share what I understand and comprehend. I do not possess knowledge of the cosmos. We can gain all knowledge when we are ready and open to it. Light and power can be ours when God thinks we are ready. I have the knowledge but little to no access to power and light. I wanted to be capable of fulfilling any dream I had. What can I make possible? I realized I would put forth effort only to fail again. I realized all my efforts depended on my need for God. We can find true knowledge, power, and light by embracing higher purposes in life. I knew I could let go of what I know is true. I could let go of cause and effect. I could possess the freedom of universal cause and effect. Universal cause and effect are the truths of how things will happen. Universal truth has no restraints. My restraint is to control what I feel and how I act. Restraint is stopping me from doing everything I think I should. If I were to give up restraint for a selfish existence, I would also be subject to spiritual law. I am human who must adhere to both earthly and spiritual laws. I would likely get into a lot of trouble if I became lawless. What would I be like with complete freedom from restraint? The will of God is no respecter of human ignorance. God's true freedom is His will to get us to comply. If I were to abide by universal order, would I enforce order? We all live with the things that we should and should not enforce in our lives. We may wonder how to manage and organize our realities. What do we need to do to enforce our own realities? Can we sort out what is acceptable and what isn't to fulfill our lives? We can choose to live our lives however we want. Only God can enforce universal laws. Even with God's universal laws, people still have their own feelings and thoughts. Free will often places all of us outside the will of God. We all seem to have different ideas about how we should live life based on how things affect us. We try to mold the world around us to follow us when we think we know best. God syndrome was always going to fail, even with power and light, because of free will. My total sacrifice to be selfless was going to fail because of free will. Free will, good and evil, always needs to be a factor in any effort we put into gaining control and power. We can choose to be selfish and serve ourselves. We can fail if we depend on someone or something to be selfish with. Levels of selfishness are dependent upon whatever we are using to be happy to keep us happy. We can succeed in anything when we are willing to realize what we need to be successful. True life success depends on the level we want to maintain. What level can we maintain? How often can we keep anything up when outside factors get in the way? We can plan and have all we need for success. We sometimes do not consider what outside factors can mix with our plans to cause them to fail. God flooded the earth when the failure of mankind reached its sinful peak. Revelation is a statement that life will need to end as we know it. The total success of anything requires things to work together. Things work better without outside interference. Finding my own limits and boundaries has helped me to be realistic and less fantastical. I realize I do not need to accomplish some things. I needed to take the stress of success and failure off my mind. I needed to find peace. I could not find my peace if I was thinking about how to make the world a better place. I discovered that what I truly desired was peace, not bliss. I wanted order, but I did not need to be in control. I wanted power and light only to amuse myself. I thought I needed to be something great to be at peace. I could accept an empty life if it came without chaos. I could accept existing if I did not have to live with complications. I needed liberation from earthly existence to achieve perfect universal peace. I needed things to work and keep working. I only wanted power and control so I could control pain and misery. I wanted to break even. We all are trying to survive, and how we survive can be a pattern of belief. What we believe can help us have an advantage over life. An advantage over life is like clean water. Clean water can help preserve life. Our thought process fails when what we believe is not real. What we believe can be so powerful, we can try to convince others to join our belief system. I have never found a belief system that is flawless. I have never found a way for a person to live without error. There always seems to be something that will interfere with our perfect plans. I had so many perfect plans, but life and others seemed to be my negative obstacles. I believe people were not willing to learn because they did not want to learn. I wanted others to learn my way was the right way. The power of belief system can leave us stuck. A belief system will have a percentage of success and failures. I was looking for the perfect belief system. Surrounding influences may be our belief system. We may find that without surrounding influences, we may fail to know what to believe. Life is a random multi-level Rubik's Cube. We should plan for life to go wrong as much as we plan for it to go right. We can have goals and shoot the target right in the middle. We need to realize we can go too far for life's perfect achievements. We can justify and use excuses to explain why we are doing the things we are doing, even if it hurts someone. We must consider every possible factor in our lives for the best success. If we do not consider every possible factor for success in our lives, then we widen our chances of failure. Even if I had achieved godhood, I was not very considerate toward free will. I failed to consider that people have the right to choose. When we are trying to achieve anything in life, are we willing to consider that everyone has feelings? Can our own levels of empathy and sympathy determine when they will make us successful? What is worth sacrificing to achieve our goals for ourselves and others? I found that we can achieve what is important once we figure out our own personal peace of mind. We cannot achieve peace of mind when we need to force or push our way through life. We cannot achieve true success by expecting reality to comply. We all want the best possible life that life has to offer. We discover the right life when we understand our true possibilities. If we only rely on our imagination without being practical, we won't see how to turn fantasy into reality. God syndrome is a place of absolute fantasy. The act of being selfless is a place of absolute fantasy. We are humans with needs. Free will is always a random factor in life. We can choose to try and bypass reality as much as we want. We should consider the facts of life as our first thought of what we can achieve. Fantasy helps us think about what could exist. However, we must understand that God may not permit everything to be real in our reality. Universal reality will always take precedence over any reality we can create. Universal reality is what God is. A human being's greatest achievement will be when we find inner stability. True stability is when no outside factor shakes us. Can we ever stay stable for long in this existence? We must face how we achieve success. It is not success if we are burning the house down while we are building it. Without logic in our daily lives, we might let emotions take over. We must realize that our own mental frequency may be outside the frequency of peace. I live life with a random state of mind. I know there will be good things and bad things that will be possible. I live each day with some understanding because I have found some knowledge. I will always feel frustrated when reality refuses to bend for me. I may understand the possibilities of how things could be, but I must accept the reality of how things are. I must consider what I can change for the better and what I lack the knowledge to change. Knowledge can change anything. The knowledge of order and universal understanding can help us know what can be real. I know we all want change, and we all, in our own way, wish for positive change to happen. The factor of change is what we need to learn. We need to learn how and when we can change things. Our success depends on what is dependable.